they can raise with the regulator themselves or with the Parliament through the ICI Committee.
Thank you. We now move to First Minister's questions. Question number 1, Johann Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Can I say that sadly, I should tell the Chamber, we've had confirmation earlier this morning a 62-year-old man fell from the Taka Harding platform during maintenance activity in the North Sea. He was transferred to Gilbert Bain Hospital but unfortunately has passed away. I know that the whole Chamber will join me in expressing our sincere condolences to the family, friends and colleagues at this distressing time.
Johann Lamont.
And we, of course, on this side add our condolences too and recognise the importance of ensuring that people going to work are kept safe when they are there. Standard Life has made plans to leave Scotland if Scotland leaves the United Kingdom. How many more companies need to leave Scotland before the First Minister admits a yes vote would be a disaster for Scottish jobs?
First Minister.
Well, let me quote exactly from the question and answer session at the Standard Life annual meeting today. How many people do you employ in Edinburgh, Scotland? What would be the impact on jobs of moving your HQ? We have made no decisions to move any part of our operations from Scotland at the current time as a consequence of the constitutional debate. We are proud of our Scottish heritage and believe that Scotland is a good place from which to run our business and compete around the world. They then say they have contingency plans if this should not continue to be the case. I think our submission would be that Standard Life will find Scotland a good place to do business, as it indeed does business in 10 countries around the world. And that will happen first and foremost because of the excellence of the staff. That's its prime asset, the 5,000 people who work in Scotland. That's the strength of the company and has made it successful. And secondly, of course, and it marks to some of the points that they've made, because the Scottish Government puts forward the concept of a shared currency and regulatory framework, which is exactly the sort of things that Standard Life have been calling for. So, can I say, given that statement, and given the importance of Scotland as a good place on which to run our business and compete around the world, can this Chamber not unite in having confidence that an independent Scotland, and that Scotland under any constitutional framework, will be exactly that?
Johann Lamont. Ms Lamont.
Only in Alex Salmond's world was what Standard Life said today represented by what he has said. A tried and tested path. A tried and tested path. Denial, deception, delusion. Delusion. Standard Life.
Ms Lamont. Ms Lamont. Deception is not acceptable in the Chamber.
It certainly isn't. It's not acceptable in real life either.
Ms Lamont.
Standard Life.
Ms Lamont. It is not acceptable in the Chamber. Continue.
Standard Life employs 5,000 people in Scotland. It is worth nearly £250 billion. 90% of its customers are in the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, Standard Life is actively making plans to leave Scotland if the First Minister gets his way. No amount of bluff, no amount of bluster and no amount of bullying from Alex Salmond can change that fact. Now, will the First Minister admit that if Scotland leaves the United Kingdom, people's jobs will leave Scotland?
First Minister.
First Minister. Johann Lamont. The bluff, the bluster and the bullying applies to George Osborne, who is the Tory Chancellor that she is in alliance with. What Standard Life are saying is what I've read out. Now, I know Johann Lamont says she doesn't believe what I say, but I was reading out exactly from the question and answer session at today's AGM. What they're pointing to is they want Scotland to be a good place from which to run our business and compete around the world, as they compete in 10 countries at the present moment. We're putting forward the view that we can say that Scotland is going to be a good place to run business from. We can do that because of the propositions we make, have a currency union, a secure regulatory environment, but above all, Standard Life depends on the skills and assets of its staff. That is what makes Standard Life and has made Standard Life a successful company. Now, the Scottish Government put forward a viewpoint of what we believe to be in the best interests of Scotland. That's a logical and rational argument. Is it really the case that Johann Lamont's making that Scotland is not going to be a good place to do business? Because that is what this hangs on. Because the evidence tells us, and it's substantial evidence, that not only it will be a good place to do business, that an independent Scotland will be a more competitive place to do business.
Johann Lamont.
It is precisely because Scotland is a good place to do business. We want Scotland to stay strong in the United Kingdom, in the currency union we have now. The First Minister has to explain why he wants to create change to something that is actually working. But of course, it's not just Standard Life. Royal Bank of Scotland, the bank the First Minister used to work for, the bank the First Minister encouraged to do the deal which made them go bust, the Royal Bank of Scotland.
Order. Order. Ms Lamont.
We've all seen the letter you wrote to Fred Goodwin saying, "On you go." The Royal Bank of Scotland has said that uncertainty is damaging their fragile business. Standard Life planning to leave, RBS shedding Scottish jobs. When the First Minister said he didn't mind Thatcher's economics, he really wasn't kidding. Isn't it the case? Isn't it the case that Alex Salmond's plans would do more damage to Scotland than even Margaret Thatcher?
First Minister.
Well, only somebody who believes that Scotland is not genetically programmed to make political decisions could possibly come up with that concoction of nonsense. So let's take it apart piece by piece. Firstly, of course, we have been here before that Standard Life in the past have expressed concerns. In 1992, of course, the Managing Director of Standard Life wrote to every employee saying that any constitutional change would be damaging for their business and cost jobs. But by 1997, they had changed their mind, as experience showed them that constitutional change could offer a secure business environment. So I think Johann Lamont shouldn't remember in the past that other people have been convinced by experience and evidence that Scotland indeed is genetically programmed to make political decisions. But then, of course, she mentions other things. I mean, look, there's been a range of statements across the financial sector. Ross McEwen stated that the Royal Bank operates in 38 countries, and independent Scotland would make it 39. The Barclays chief executive just a few days ago described independence as a matter for the Scottish people to decide. We think we can make it work either way as a bank. Martin Gilbert of Aberdeen Asset Management, if it did happen, it would be neutral for Scotland's financial service industry. So major figures recognise that the operations of their business in an independent Scotland could be highly successful. In the past, when we were faced with businesses who had concerns, who had doubts, then the answer of those supporting constitutional change was to demonstrate by evidence and experience that Scotland would be more successful. That is what has been done in the past, and that is what will be done with the independence debate. But the onus on Johann Lamont is to actually say that she believes that Scotland is capable of making political decisions. Because if you don't believe that, and she seemed to deny it in a debate earlier this week, then the whole basis on which we've come so far to this Parliament is being denied. And as we've demonstrated our ability to run so many of the affairs of Scotland better than they've ever been run from Westminster, then so we can demonstrate our ability to run our economy and the other great issues which an independent Scotland will do.
Johann Lamont.
Yet more from the First Minister. Obviously somebody up all night Googling Alex Salmond is right. I just hope they were getting paid for it. This is far too serious for debating points from the First Minister and cheap points about the significance of what Standard Life is saying. Now, BP has warned that independence will damage Scotland. RBS damaged by the uncertainty Alex Salmond is causing even now. Standard Life planning to leave if there is a yes vote. The workers on the Clyde warning there will be no shipbuilding after a yes vote. The First Minister can selectively quote all he likes. He can rewrite people's words and try to mislead the people of Scotland all he can. But the reality, more jobs go than at Ravenscraig, more jobs than Bathgate, more jobs than Linwood. If there is a yes vote, isn't it the case that we will need to rewrite this song? If there is a yes vote, isn't it the case that we will need to rewrite the song? Standard Life, no more. RBS, no more. Shipbuilding, no more. The Scotland we love and fight for, no more. And all for Alex Salmond, a price worth paying.
First Minister.
Johann Lamont,
Order.
recall what she's just quoted. Bathgate, Linwood, Lochaber, no more. These were the things that were put out by the No campaign in 1979, a campaign which Johann Lamont supported because she was against devolution. Scotland did not get a parliament, and guess what happened? Bathgate, Linwood, Lochaber all closed. Now, of course, if Johann Lamont hadn't supported the No campaign in 1979, she could have said that was all Tory scaremongering. But now we're saying not just Tory scaremongering, because Johann Lamont was a no voter in 1979. She agrees with exactly the same tactics that Scotland has grown out of over these last 20 years. We've seen through the scaremongering. If we hadn't seen through it, we wouldn't have this Parliament. And can I say to Johann Lamont that Scotland will go on to prosperity and more equality through an independent Scotland? It won't be our business no more. It will be Labour no more.
Question number 2. Order. Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to add our condolences to those from the whole chamber to the family of the worker from the Taka platform who was tragically killed. I'd like to ask the First Minister when he'll next meet the Prime Minister.
First Minister.
No plans near future.
Ruth Davidson.
Thank you. This morning, 5,000 people across Scotland woke up to hear that in the event of a yes vote, their jobs might be moving south. The Chief Executive of Standard Life, David Nish, said that he had started to establish companies outside of Scotland to operate in the event of independence. The firm stresses that it is not telling people how to vote. They are just making calm and rational preparations for what happens when you break up a country in which it is operating. Standard Life has just told us their plan B. Why won't the First Minister?
First Minister.
Can I read Ruth Davidson something written in the past? Quote, "The Scottish life insurance industry has emerged in recent weeks as the business sector most publicly tormented by even a hint of Home Rule. The biggest players, led by Standard Life and Scottish Widows, even resorted to ill-judged letters to staff, warning of the grave consequences for jobs of any slippage from the status quo." That was written by Alf Young, the commentator, talking about the 1992 election campaign. Now, what was worst about that aspect in the campaign? It was the Conservative Party who were exploiting fears of business and trying to translate them into opposition to constitutional change in Scotland. But what happened by 1997 is that people had seen through that tactic. Now, I've read what Standard Life actually said today. What they said, they wanted security in having a competitive business environment. I've read it out to the Chamber, that Scotland would be a good place to which to run our business and compete around the world in the 10 countries and jurisdictions which Standard Life currently operate around the world. Now, Ruth Davidson, can she not, from the position of the Scottish Conservatives, can she not express the confidence that we can create in Scotland that good, competitive place to do business so that our highly successful companies can grow their staff in an independent Scotland?
Ruth Davidson. Ms Davidson.
What the First Minister doesn't understand is that when David Nish tells people how independence would adversely affect his business, it's not a conspiracy. When RBS says that independence would hurt its credit rating, that's not a conspiracy. When BP says independence would threaten its business, that's not a conspiracy. When ASDA says independence would put up prices, that's not a conspiracy. When the austerity-hating, Nobel Prize-winning left-wing economist Paul Krugman says that a currency union without shared government would be very dangerous, that's not a conspiracy. When the Canadian central banker Mark Carney says you have to give up sovereignty to have a currency union, that's not a conspiracy. And however much the First Minister might like to protest, but when the Chancellor of the Exchequer and his opposite numbers and the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury say that a currency union with a foreign country would not be in the interests of the rest of the UK, that's not a conspiracy either. People explaining how independence would affect them, would affect the country, would affect their business, would affect their customers is vital to this debate, and the SNP shouldn't dismiss those voices or shout them down. Standard Life has said that jobs could go in an independent Scotland if they aren't given clarity on 5 major issues. So what can the First Minister tell the company's employees today that he couldn't tell them yesterday?
First Minister.
Can I make it quite clear so there's no room for misunderstanding? The conspiracy is not taking place among a range of the people and companies that Ruth Davidson quoted. The conspiracy is taking place by the Conservative Party and the other scaremongers who want to deliberately misrepresent what's being said. And classic, of course, is the Governor of the Bank of England. The Governor of the Bank of England, who made a judicious speech in Edinburgh a few weeks ago, is to be incorporated with the Chancellor of Exchequer's political statements against monetary union. Now, I've already read out what the Chief Executive of the Royal Bank of Scotland said. I heard him on the radio this morning. It's a million miles from Ruth Davidson's attempt to represent or to incorporate these comments in her political argument. He did not say that. It's on the record what else has been said. Perhaps in these things we should follow the investment to tell us what's actually going on. And I noticed this in the papers last week. Standard Life Investments is reported to have agreed a £75 million joint venture acquisition and development deal with Percival Securities for a site in St Andrews Square in Edinburgh. Standard Life Investments described the deal as a first-class long-term investment for our partners. That is actually what's going on in terms of the Scottish economy. And the attempts by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, going back to 2011, to try and undermine confidence have failed, and indeed Ruth Davidson's attempts will as well. Now, she asks who is supporting our proposition for a currency union. A huge range of people, like well, there's Jim McCall, Tony Banks, Dan MacDonald, Sandy Adam, Martin Mackay, Evan McKee, key business people who signed a letter to the Scotsman, the Scottish Council for Development and Industry. The UK is an optimal currency zone, and a sterling union would minimise economic disruption in their future macroeconomic and fiscal sustainability. I read Dr Jim Walker, Rod MacLeod of the Banking and Business Finance Partner of Todsbury, a range of people, but above all the Scottish people who by significant majority think our proposal is right. Now, can I think of anyone else who supports our idea for a currency union? Jackson Carlaw. Not only is he a supporter, he goes further, he will man the barricades. And I am sure, because I love giving Ruth Davidson the benefit of the doubt, when Jackson's on the barricades, then Ruth and I will be standing there right along with him.
Alice McInnes.
Thank you. The First Minister will be aware that last week, in response to investigations by Education Scotland inspectors and the Care Inspectorate, it was announced that the independent Hamilton School and Nursery in Aberdeen would close immediately. Primary pupils this week started attending classes at Braeside, but the future provision for preschool children following the closure of the Hamilton School nursery remains in doubt. Will the First Minister update us on progress, and will he undertake to ensure that everything possible is being done to find places for the nursery children affected and minimise the disruption to families at this difficult time?
First Minister.
I thank the member for a question. I can report, and she knows that Aberdeen Council and indeed the Scottish Government are working very closely on this. And as at last night, over 50 places had already been secured for the nursery children involved. I also know, and she understands, that faced with the reports that the Government ministers were faced with, there was no reasonable alternative but to take the action which was required to be taken with regard to Hamilton School. But she has my assurance that we will continue to work closely with Aberdeen Council to ensure the minimum of disruption. I think a very rapid and effective answer was left with the primary children, and we will seek to have the minimum of disruption for the nursery children as well. But I think, looking at the efforts that are being made, and it affects the children, the families, and of course the staff of Hamilton School, I think everyone is doing their utmost to make sure there's a minimum of disruption, and particularly, as in all decisions that have been made on this issue, that the welfare of children has been uppermost in everyone's mind.
Question 3, Eadie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what support the Scottish Government is providing to food banks in order to help tackle the impact of UK welfare reforms.
First Minister.
Well, in total, we have now put in place more than £258 million of mitigation. It's mitigation over the 3 years from 2013-14 to 2015-16 in terms of answering some of the cost and some of the impact of the UK Government's welfare change. Now, that help is aimed at some of the most vulnerable in society, at tackling, as I say, the worst impact of these cuts. And these cuts, of course, let's remember that research in December found that food banks themselves believe are the root cause of the massive increase in the numbers using their services. We will continue to work with local authorities, third sector partners and others how best to ensure that those who use food banks have access to appropriate advice and support, and I've asked the Poverty Alliance to carry out more research into food poverty in Scotland.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. In the week when Scotland's largest food bank ran out of food, does he agree with the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, the Reverend Lorna Hood, when she said, "This is not right"? Is it not an affront to the dignity of tens of thousands of our fellow human beings that they are forced to rely on these services? Is it not shameful that the only thing preventing children from going to bed hungry is the charity and goodwill of others? And is it not the measure of a just society that we resolve to tackle and eradicate the poverty which exists in Scotland?
First Minister.
Yes, I agree with that. And I also think that any politician who visits and supports a food bank is caught in the horns of a dilemma of two minds. One, of course, there is admiration for the solidarity being shown by those who work in food banks, those who are volunteering to help their fellow citizens in time of extremity. But there's also the clear understanding, and this is shared by the volunteers in the food banks, that it is disgraceful that in 21st century Scotland we are seeing the spread of the necessity to help our fellow citizens in distress. I think both these aspects should be taken forward in policy. One, the solidarity, which does help people, and secondly, the determination to eliminate the necessity of people having to rely on food banks in 21st century Scotland.
Jackie Bailey.
I couldn't agree more with the First Minister's comments. He will be aware, of course, that referrals have been made to food banks instead of grants being made available from the Scottish Welfare Fund, something that he has control over. This is happening at a time when the Scottish Welfare Fund is substantially underspent, only a third spent in the first 6 months of operation, and the Minister last week projecting an underspend of millions. Would he therefore consider an urgent review to ensure that the Scottish Welfare Fund better supports those in crisis, negating some of the need for food banks?
First Minister.
It is under review, and indeed when I visited the Edinburgh food banks a few weeks ago, they were saying exactly that review and the cooperation with the local authorities is enabling a better provision through the Welfare Fund. Jackie Baillie has often said that these funds are undersubscribed. It seems to be quite clear that the series of mitigations which have been put in place by the Scottish Government and local authorities are not going to be undersubscribed. They have new schemes which have been set up, and as time goes on, more and more is being claimed from that mitigation scheme. That is the reality. But the other reality at some stage Jackie Baillie is going to face is that with all the best will in the world, with the £258 million of mitigation, we cannot cope with the full extent of the welfare cuts which are being borne down upon many sections of Scottish society. And given that is the reality, at some stage she'll also have to reconsider her incredible position, not that Scotland, as she put it, couldn't run welfare provision, that it shouldn't run welfare provision. The reality is it must run welfare provision.
Question 4, Roderick Campbell.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's position is on the recent increase in reported incidents of rape.
First Minister.
Well, there are many troubling aspects. I mean, we know that a high proportion of rapes are never reported to the police. The increase, therefore, may in part be because victims have more confidence in the police and therefore more willing to come forward and report crime. What's more, Police Scotland have now made tackling rape a key priority for the new service. The Crown Office has also improved the way it handles rape with the creation of the National Sexual Crimes Unit, a team of specialist prosecutors to ensure these cases are given the best available consideration and preparation.
Roderick Campbell.
I thank the First Minister for that answer, but whatever the reasons for the increase in recorded incidents, given the current constraints on public finance, can the First Minister advise what funding is available from the Scottish Government to ensure that agencies who assist alleged rape victims are properly financed and resourced?
First Minister.
Well, there are now 14 Scottish rape crisis centres located across Scotland. They'll receive funding from the Scottish Government of £700,000 each year during 2012 to 2015. Rape Crisis Scotland will receive £244,000 of Scottish Government funding a year. This will enable a strategic approach to tackling rape and sexual assault and also support the 14 rape crisis centres. We are also providing for a rape advocacy pilot. This grant will be for the Rape Crisis Advocacy Service, which supports victims through their contact with the criminal justice system. We are supporting the Rape Crisis Helpline, which will receive £260,000 of Scottish Government funding for the year from 2012 to 2015. And that helpline, of course, offers free and confidential support and information for women and men who have experienced sexual violence.
Question number 5, Ken Macintosh.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister, in light of the evidence given by the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Wellbeing at the Public Audit Committee on the 19th of February, how long confidentiality clauses have been included automatically in NHS settlement agreements?
First Minister.
Well, compromise agreements were introduced in 1993, and while confidentiality clauses have often been used in these agreements, there is no obligation to do so. However, there is understandable concern that the inclusion of a confidentiality clause within the standard template produced by NHS Scotland's Central Legal Office in 2009 could be encouraging their use. So that's why Alec Neil this morning announced that the confidentiality clauses are to be removed from the standard template, and health boards told that the presumption must be against their use. Alec Neil has also made it abundantly clear that there is no clause whatsoever that can ever prevent an NHS employee raising any concerns they have on patient safety.
Ken Macintosh.
Can I thank the First Minister for his remarks and for the tenor of his remarks? Can I just ask if he's aware, according to Freedom of Information requests I have lodged, that in 2007-2008 there were 4 compromise or settlement arrangements in the NHS in Scotland at a cost of £130,000. That figure has risen every year since, to 6, to 8, to 17, in 2012 to 110 at a cost of more than £2 million. Last year to 143 at a cost of £3.5 million. Now that we discover that every one of these, except one apparently, has a confidentiality clause, does he still maintain, as the Health Secretary tried to do at the Audit Committee, that this is an historic problem, or does he recognise it's one of his own creation?
First Minister.
Well, I mean, after Ken Macintosh thanking me for the way I responded to the first question, I think Ken Macintosh should accept that the Health Secretary has consistently said he's looking at this issue and trying to find the reasons for the spread of confidentiality clauses and how that can be best sorted in the interests of patient care in Scotland, and how we can make sure that all parts of agreements reconcile with the absolute right that there can be no clause whatsoever in terms of law to prevent an NHS employee raising any concerns they have on patient safety. But I think to accuse the government, which established the Patients' Rights Act, which established the confidentiality helpline, and which now Alec Neil announced this very morning at the Royal College of Nursing conference, of taking a further move to ensure and try and deal through the use of the standard template to make it absolutely clear to health boards that the confidentiality clauses are removed from standard template and boards told that the presumption should be against their use. That seems to me a range of measures which demonstrate this government's commitment to allow people within the health service to report their concerns without fear or favour.
Question 6, Chick Brodie.
To ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government will ensure that all sectors of sport are equipped to handle cardiac arrests by participants and spectators.
First Minister.
Well, heart disease and the treatment of cardiac arrest remains a clinical priority for NHS Scotland. We want everyone, not just those who participate in sport, to have access to the best possible care as quickly as possible. A substantial investment in heart disease services has reduced Scotland's premature death from coronary heart disease by 43.6% in the last 10 years. On Monday, the Cabinet Secretary for Health announced that we are investing £100,000 to increase the number of public access to defibrillators across Scotland, which will benefit sports participants as well as the wider community.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. A campaign backed by the Arrhythmia Alliance, the PGA and the European Tour aims to have one defibrillator device at each of the 300 golf clubs in the UK and Ireland by end 2014. In this exciting year for golf in Scotland, will the Government work with the campaign to persuade every golf club in Scotland to install such a device?
First Minister.
Well, as Chick Brodie knows, this afternoon the Minister for Commonwealth Games and Sport and I will be meeting Bernard Gallagher to hear more about the campaign, to increase access to defibrillators across Scotland. Of course, Bernard's own experience, recent experience, has of course highlighted the life-saving potential of public access to defibrillation, and I look forward to learning more about the campaign. And I know the whole Chamber will welcome the fact that someone uses their adverse personal experience to promote a campaign which can bring great benefits to all the people of Scotland.
Thank you. That ends First Minister's questions. We now move to members' business. Members who are leaving the Chamber should do so quickly and quietly.